So this is continuing our diagnosis, world exclusive diagnosis of the so-called Operation Black Month. Operation Black Month. Why am I using this word operation? Because it is very much similar to the Operation Black Vote. Operation Black Vote is totally corrupt outfit fronted by a corrupt careerist associated with an offshoot of Ken Lying Still Livingston. Black Month, Black Vote suggests that there is something instantly, immediately recognizable in the word black in that context. Black vote. What is a black vote? Now, the black MPs, as I was saying earlier in the last edition, which was interrupted a few times technically, there are significant numbers of black skinned conservative MPs in the House of Commons. And their numbers appear to be stable. And they have been there since the May 2010 election, which Gordon Brown lost to the Conservatives, and David Cameron got in with the help of Nick Sick Clegg, who has sold his soul to Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, who has paid him several million pounds to spin the lies and to perpetrate other lies via Facebook. And Sick Clegg, who is married to a woman from, was it Spain? Is she Spanish? Wedded to a woman from Spain and overhyped that connection. He apparently met her while he was in the European Union in some kind of bureaucratic capacity. Sick Clegg was never an MVP as far as I can tell, but he was involved in the European Union. And this Gonzalez woman has been presented in the British media almost like the crook, Jeffrey Archer's wife, Mary the Fragrant Archer. Apparently, one judge in the court where the crook Archer was convicted, one judge was able to overcome that criminal profile and to be fascinated by the fragrance that he detected in the environment that was apparent whenever Mary Archer entered the court. How corrupt and how stupid or brainless can a human be for a judge to be in that stupid position to call her Fragrant Mary? Mary Archer has been a part and parcel of the corruption, criminality, and lying and fabrication that the crook Jeffrey Archer has made an industry out of. The fact that a judge could say that the wife of a convicted fraudster and criminal and liar could be elevated to that position shows that it is worse. It is a worse state than the state induced and state enforced mental slavery and brainwashing displayed, exhibited in the behavior of the bureaucracy, including the judicial bureaucracy, in regimes like the USSR controlled, let's say, Romania. where Nicolae Ceausescu had such a corrupt number of years. But the communist controlled China. The communist or communism is not socialism. Communism is a collective dictatorship against the proletariat. Now, there is a piece in the British newspaper, The Times, on Friday, the 7th of October 2022, apparently examining the factors that produced the current Chinese Communist frontman, Xi, as the world's most powerful leader. It is not a truthful piece. It is in itself a lying piece that perpetrates the mythology, really the mythology cultivated and fostered by the communist bureaucracy. The Times is owned by the Dirty Digger Murdoch. But even before the Dirty Digger Murdoch took over the Times in the middle of the 1980s, when he moved the rest of the operations to Wapping, even before the Times was taken over by the Dirty Digger Murdoch, the Times really didn't break any stories, any news, really. So I'm demystifying and demythologizing many of the compelling myths that sell the brand British. Fleet Street never broke a story that actually told the story, told the truth about the then USSR. The only sources for the British Western propaganda against the USSR, the only authentic, genuine, reliable, truthful, or nearly truthful sources about what was going on behind the Iron Curtain, so called, actually came from the Iron Curtains, behind the Iron Curtains, especially people like Alexander Dubček in Czechoslovakia in 1968, and people like Alexandra Solzhenitsyn in the USSR. Solzhenitsyn more extensive than Alexander Dubček in Czechoslovakia. But whatever the difference between them in terms of the length and quality and the contents, these were people from behind the curtains, behind the Iron Curtains. They are the authentic sources of the truthful information about what was going on within the Soviet Union, the Soviet bloc, Eastern Bloc. But having said that, even Alexander Solzhenitsyn, after spending 20 years or so in the USA, found the USA corrupt, untruthful, dishonest. So there, so he returned to Russia, Mother Russia, and he found mental and spiritual and intellectual solace and comfort that he never thought he would find back in the Soviet Union. So the whole mythology about the Soviet Union being a block of lies and concealment, as opposed to the universal divine freedom afforded by the West, was a lie. And as Imran Khan in Pakistan has been pointing out, the imported hukumat that the CIA inspired removal of him by a bogus judicial action in Pakistan in May 2022 was in part a retaliation against Imran Khan and his regime for his alleged conciliatory relationship with the Soviet Union as fronted by Vladimir Putin. Now, Imran Khan had nothing to do with Putin's war against Ukraine. The biggest use or abuse made of Imran Khan's links with the Soviet Union Russia, as it is now, Russia as fronted by Vladimir Putin, was the allegation that Imran Khan supported Putin's war against Ukraine. No, he didn't. Imran Khan was too busy with his own confrontation with the crooks of the Shabazz family and the Zardari family and other crooks in Pakistan. Secondly, he didn't have anything to do with Ukraine. He was visiting Putin on a day that coincided with the declaration of the war by Putin against Ukraine. But Imran Khan was visiting Putin and Russia about what? About gas, about the economic relationship between Pakistan and the Russian Republic or Russian kind of state fronted by Vladimir Putin. So this is the kind of reality check against the fantasy created by the West and the Western media, including the Financial Times, quote, edited by a Muslim born woman of Lebanon, has been lying at the behest of the CIA propaganda machine and agenda. Now, as I have said, the CIA is not a secret organization, it's a cultural organization that very much depends on its sustainability on the cultural, racist, imperialist set of lies daily confected and updated in order to keep the American dictatorship in control of most of the countries in the world, as far or as many countries in the world as they can manage. And as a former CIA man, Philip A.G. revealed in his definitive inaugural book, Inside the Company. I mean, when he wrote that, he was outside of the United States, and he lived in the UK. We're talking about the 1970s, when the government fronted by Harold Wilson had just mysteriously resigned, and Wilson had been replaced by the racist moron James Callaghan. And Callaghan had the Home Secretary, Marlin Rees. It was Rees who kind of fronted the action against Philip A.G. and a New York-based American journalist called Mark Housenball, not Hussein Ball. Housenball is spelled Hosenball. Those two were targeted by the US propaganda assaults. And they wanted to demonize Hosenball and AG. Hosenball for his sympathetic writings against the US foreign policy, imperialism, and corruption. And Philip A.G., of course, for his extensive revelations about how the CIA operates. And Philip Agee, in his book Inside the Company, focused on the country in the South American continent called Nicaragua. And the way that the Nicaraguan government and state and society were being targeted and manipulated, and Nicaraguan citizens and post holders being bought off and set against one another. These are the things that are known to people in other countries as well. But these are not things that a CIA employee of long standing had admitted or revealed. That is the difference. In 1976 77, I think, that year, I traveled across England and covering various meetings that Philip A.G. attended of student unions at university campuses. And I covered those in my position as the elected editor of the publication called NEPAM. NEPAM is Northeast Polytechnic Activists Monitor. I was elected in 1976 by what is now by the students of what is now the University of East London. So I was the publications editor of the Northeast Polytechnic Activists Monitor. I was in the Northeast London Polytechnic Students' Union publications editor, 76. And I think the electoral manifesto that I presented was supported actively, most actively, by a man called Fred Short. I don't know whether Fred Short is dead or alive, and another one called Bob Harper. Robert Harper, was a active supporter of the trade union movement and the ideology. But Fred Short, for no apparent connection, he didn't have any apparent connection with the kind of traditional left or socialist kind of organizations or movements. He thought that what I was saying deserved to be supported. So he supported me, and tactfully and technically and verbally and vocally. So I got the majority votes, overwhelming majority votes against a thing named Jerry Udall. Now, Jerry Udall was the editor of the Nepam publication, which I think had been originally established by an Australian. At the Northeast London Polytechnic. But when I took over, I completely turned the title into a political publication, very much containing political information about the various actions, student actions, aimed at the administration of the director of the Polytechnic at the time, a man called George Brosen. Now, the publications that I put together in the year that I was in post are historic, more historic than all the combined contents of what happened before under that same name, NEPAM, Northeast Polytechnic Activists Monitor, and done by any of the going wider later when the GLC came into being under Ken Livingstone Livingstone 5 years later in May 1981. None of the publications that the GLC actually funded, including the riffraff titles called Caribbean Times and the later the Asian Times. Now, riffraff, although his name is Arif Ali, originated from the Caribbean, although his ancestors came from the what is now India. But he didn't have the instinctive identification that he made was with the word Caribbean, not Indian or Asian. So when Ken Livingstone Livingstone began to fund the Caribbean Times, and the Caribbean Times went out of its way to worship the image of Ken Livingstone Livingstone, an idea struck the liar Rifraf Ali that if he published another title called Asian Times, then I could use that title Asian to negotiate more bribery and funding from the GLC, which he did. He published the Asian Times, but it had nothing Asian. The only Asian thing content in the Asian Times were the contents about Keith Slee's vase. Now that was in the 1980s, before Slee's vase actually became an MP. Slee's vase was one of the grotesquely promoted 4 black section t-shirt wearers, let's say. And Rifraf Ali put Slee's vase's face and name on every page if you could help it. And every mention of Slee's vase was a mention linked with the servitude to the image of Ken Livingstone Livingstone, and so on. So there was a non-Asian because Slee's vase never identified himself really as a member of the ordinary Asian population. He came like Suella Braverman, now who was Suella Fernandez, who is the Home Secretary now. He either he came from Goa or one of those little islands off the Indian coast. And Slee's vase identified himself as a Christian, which is not the dominant ideology or faith in India by any means. So Slee's vase was foisted on the imagination of the public as quote black, whereas the main obsession with the black identity was with the base being Caribbean or African origin. The ordinary people of the Asian background were never considered as black. And here was an Asian from Goa who was being called black. That is opportunism and corruption, opportunistic corruption in the extreme. By the time Slee's vase became an MP, the operation of the Greater London Council had been finished. But by that time, Rifraf Ali had pocketed enough money by trading as an Asian publisher as well. None of the Asian community in the whole of the UK got any space, especially space to report on the struggle, the battle going on against racism at the grassroots, at the local level, at the personal level, at the organization and community levels in the country anywhere. So the GMT was scrapped by the date 1986 when the termination date was set by the regime of Margaret Thatcher. The Asian Times and the Caribbean Times kind of continued, but not really alive because the main funding had ceased. And the Gujarati based Patel that got bribed and bribery money from Ken Livingstone's GLC was equally kind of forced to stage a reduction of his operation, New Life and whatever. And he got a woman called Anne Hughes. Now Anne Hughes, according to another white woman who knew them and who knew the GLC because she was operating as a kind of observer of the GLC and knew the behavior of Anne Hughes in connection with the Patel. She said to me, this woman that I don't remember the name of at this time, I'm talking about the 1980s, talking about the first part of the 1980s. So this woman told me that although they say that you cannot become, that you don't be converted to Hinduism, Anne Hughes has become converted to Hinduism. Now, Patel is a fanatic Hindutva believer from the African continent because that's where his kind of main ancestors went as a result of the British. The British sent people from India, people, poor people from India, to Africa and also to the Caribbean. So the likes of Rifraf Ali is a descendant of poor Indians that were sent to the Caribbean by the British. And C.B. Patel is a descendant of the poor Indians sent from Gujarat in India to Africa. I mean, the country of Zimbabwe, not Zimbabwe, Uganda and Kenya mainly were dominated by mainly Indian origin businesses, directly resulting from the arrival in those countries of Indians under the policy projects worked out by the British Empire. So when Idi Amin in Uganda and his counterparts in Kenya and Zambia decided in the late 1960s to oust the mainly Asian businesses from their country, these people sought asylum and refuge in Britain as a direct result of the connection with the British Empire. So that's how C.B. Patel appeared in the UK. That is how Priti Patel's parents appeared in Leicester. Now, Suella Benjamin, is it? Came from Goa. And Sleaze Baz came from Goa, I think. And as such, they are not Hindus, most certainly not Muslims, but they are kind of Catholic, I think, Christians. So when Sleaze Baz was decorated as a black section, whatever, that was a fraud. He took part in a knowing fraud because although the Asian people constituted the reality of black demography in the context of racism, he didn't identify with the Asian population. But as soon as he became a black section kind of thing, he started to cultivate connections with the Asian population in this country. But because his sleaze was, he's a crook, he targeted the most kind of rich Indians in the UK, the Hinduja brothers. It's like the 1980s version of the Guptas in South Africa. So Hinduja brothers were too glad to have him as their servant. And then Sleaze was found that he could actually align himself or liaise, as the corrupt word is, with the Muslims, not the ordinary Muslims in this UK, but the corrupt Muslim leaders. As a result of which Sleaze was continued his corrupt alliance and liaisons with the crooks up to the time when Lutfur Rahman was being promoted, invented as the crook's nominee to become the occupant in the corrupt post of elected mayor in Tower Hamlets. In that capacity, Keith Sleaze Vaz appeared at the Brady Centre, which is opposite the Montefiore Centre, in the Hanbury Street on Saturday, the 6th of February 2010. Sleaze Vaz was there, George Galloway was there, Ken Lying Still Livingston was there, and there were a host of so-called Muslim members of the House of Peers. An assortment of criminals more diverse could not be imagined. And these criminals descended on the Brady Centre to anoint their nominee, their kind of endorsee, unheard of Lutfur Rahman. And Sleaze Vaz and George Git Galloway pronounced the name of Lutfur Rahman as if Lutfur Rahman had been sent by a huge authority somewhere up there on the skies. And they both said words to the effect that Lutfur Rahman was the best suited for the post of elected mayor in Tower Hamlets. Now, how the fuck did the Sleaze was living by that time in Leicester? What the fuck did he know about Tower Hamlets? And what did he know about Lutfur Rahman? What did he know about the people of Tower Hamlets? Same applies to George Git Galloway. He only appeared in Tower Hamlets because he was still holding the post of MP for Bethnal Green at the expense of Bethnal Green and Bow. George Galloway remains totally ignorant about Tower Hamlets. His only knowledge is a product of his connection with the crooks operating from the complex called the East London Muslim Centre or London Muslim Centre, which houses the East London Mosque and the operations of what used to be called the IFE, Islamic Forum in Europe. These are both not connected with the ordinary Muslims in Tower Hamlets, never have been, never will be. So we are still talking about the Black History Month and exposing the emptiness and bankruptcy, moral bankruptcy ethical bankruptcy and the evidential bankruptcy on the part of those who promote the thing called the Black History Month. As I said previously, before the interrupted fast part got interrupted, I think, there was a similarity between the two banners, Operation Black Vote and Black History Month. Operation Black Vote was confected by a very corrupt individual along with the collusion of an individual called Lee Jasper. Now, it was Lee Jasper who never belonged with any black community activities in London until he surfaced from somewhere in the Midlands or up there. And he surfaced in a big way, which appeared to suggest that behind his surfacing, Lee Jasper was being given the behind the scene backing by the state. It appeared later that Lee Jasper had been a kind of paid member of various outlets and outfits, not far from the state, including the police. So it was absolutely revealing to find that when Andrew Gilligan investigated the tenure of Ken Livingston Livingstone as the mayor in the name of London, he found that Lee Jasper was one of the most powerful ally or aid that Livingstone was using and had been using. It then was transpired or revealed that Lee Jasper had been sexually kind of involved with a woman of Asian background or identity. And that his involvement with her was sensationally, definitively conclusive kind of mold breaker in exposing Ken Livingstone as being unfit because he employed Lee Jasper to engage in these kind of things while Lee Jasper was being more than justifiably funded by Ken Livingston Livingstone. There are many, many questions about Ken Livingston Livingstone's relationship with Lee Jasper. Remember, Lee Jasper generally featured in the mainstream British media as a, quote, black activist. But he had no connection with ordinary black people, ordinary black community. His blackness was a gift of the very not black Ken Livingston Livingstone, who utilized him, exploited him as his raging diversity display. Now, Lee Jasper occurred after Ken Livingston Livingstone had done the experiment and tried a thing in Tower Hamlets called Kumar Morsheet. Now, Kumar Morsheet was no more representative of the Bangladeshi community than Lee Jasper was representative of the people of Brixton. Morsheet arrived in the UK through illegal means, and his main job was with the corrupt bank, BCCI. And while Ken Livingston Livingstone was in the middle of exploiting or utilizing Kumar Morsheet in Tower Hamlets, Morsheet became prosecuted for fraud and corruption and theft. Although he avoided being convicted, the fact that he was being prosecuted, and he was prosecuted, was bad enough. That dimmed the prospect for his being elevated to the post to which Lee Jasper was elevated later by Ken Lyons to Livingston. So you notice that these are people that are falsified images, these people. Lee Jasper arrived in London from nowhere, somewhere in the northern part of England. And Kumar Morshid arrived in the UK illegally and actually coming as a direct result of one of his parents' political connections with the regime of Awami League. Nothing to do with the ordinary Bangladeshi community in the UK. Never has been, never will be. So when the Kumar Morshid adventure failed, Ken Lyons to Livingstone created the Lee Jasper adventure. And the Lee Jasper adventure then extended after its expiry, if you like, or near expiry, resulting from the Andrew Gilligan investigation, into the appearance of a thing called Operation Black Vote. The Operation Black Vote is a complete fraud because although it is immediately, linguistically, conceptually understandable, it really has no reality behind it in the sense of politically holding to account anyone who gets the support of black people as voters. And the other thing with the Operation Black Vote is the other evidence of lies about this black section and black community and blackness. Remember the thing I said about Haringey. The references to all the events that took place on the 6th of October 1985 and thereafter, with the death of policeman Blake Luke and the prolonged prosecution of Winston Silcott and others, is that the narrative has been exclusively related to black people, meaning African people or people from the Caribbean with African descent. It is directly, exclusively, thoroughly in far removed, distant kind of location than the location of the Asian backgrounded people. The evidence is and has been and will always be that racists attack people of African background as well as of Asian background with similar prejudice. The tactics may be different, but the prejudice is the same, the purpose is the same. And yet, what happened with the Operation Black Vote is that at the point where the Labour Party's nominee for the post of mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets, at the first due election, there was this celebration at the Troxy in the Commercial Road on the 14th of September. 14th of September 2010, there was a celebration. Celebration event was organized by supporters of the candidacy of Lutfur. And who were the main kind of named speakers on the platform? From Steve Bullock, bullshit, the racist bullshitter, and this Operation Black Vote man. Though both of them certifying to the assembly of almost all Bangladeshis at a Troxy on the 14th of September 2010 that Lutfur Rahman was the best person for that post. Now, what the fuck did they know? Just as Sleaze Vaz and Git Galloway had endorsed Lutfur Rahman even before the referendum at the Brady Center on the 6th of February 2010, after the referendum result and after the selection of Lutfur Rahman, these two, one from the Operation Black Vote and the other from Lewisham's, well, he was the elected mayor in Lewisham. They both said identical words as if they had been reading the same script given to them. They were on the main platform and they said Lutfur Rahman was the best candidate to take Tower Hamlets in words that they said, as if to the outer space, like to heaven. Now, Lutfur Rahman was a fantasy, as was Rabina Khan. She was inaugurated there as the kind of announcer of the things. Where is Rabina Khan now? This is October 2022. And Rabina Khan's ambition to become the MP for Tower Hamlets for the Lib Dems was ended, well, Tower Hamlets MP or Tower Hamlets mayor was ended by the evidence of our incompetence. Rabina Khan has been on the record saying that she has always belonged here. She has not. And we should talk more about Rabina Khan and the history of her irrelevance and the imposition of Rabina Khan at the expense of the people of the community Tower Hamlets. In due course, update in due course. So there is no evidence that any of these events, any of these individuals cited by the mainstream or cited by the ordinary kind of media as being of the community, black community or the Asian community, any of them relates, belongs with the communities. The complex of buildings known as the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre is a complex that is operated on the surface at the expense of, in the name of the ordinary Muslim people that live in Tower Hamlets and in other neighboring nearby areas from where they travel for the congregation prayers, especially the Friday prayers. But London Muslim Centre as well as the East London Mosque are controlled by secretive individual groups who don't have any connection with the reality of the lives of the people in the borough of Tower Hamlets. This pair of centers, London Muslim Centre and East London Mosque, these are used or abused by these secret, unaccountable individuals by a series of lies that they perpetrate in the name of the Muslims. Nothing that they do or think is to do with the pure Muslim interests of the community. They are unaccountable, they are very, very corrupt, and are dishonest, and they are the ones that actually created, brainwashed Lutfur Rahman and created Lutfur Rahman regimes. And they are the ones who have done the trick again to the liars of the left, like Navara media idiots, and they are kind of likes in the USA, as well as the fascists who supported the Serbian genocide of the Muslims in Bosnia in the early 1990s, that are operating now as an ultra right wing platform, posing as ultra left wingers. These three outlets have repeated Lutheraman's lies that when Richard Morey ousted him from the post, the results included Lutheraman losing everything. That was a lie. Nothing Lutheraman lost had anything to do with the ouster from post on the 23rd of April 2015 by the order of the election commissioner Richard Morey. The fact that Lutheraman claimed for a period in the published propaganda that he was a solicitor, that may lead people or mislead people into thinking that he was a competent solicitor, competent in the law. He was not. All the anyone who passes the building of East London Mosque in the Whitechapel Road, if they pause, they can see the signboards on the building. Too many signboards belong to solicitors. Why would any solicitor have any business operating from a mosque? Unless, of course, they want to exploit the mosque and its location as a central kind of draw for clients who are Muslims. Not the solicitors who can be said to belong to the Muslim faith. None of the solicitors who can be described as belonging to the Muslim faith and operating from addresses in Tower Hamlets, none of them, not one of them, is a competent lawyer. I said that on the record. Let a single one of them come forward and deny this. Not a single one of them is a competent lawyer. Well, their counterparts, the solicitors' counterparts, are the licensed law trading quote barristers. I mean, the antiques of one barrister connected with that lot, Lutfur Rahman, is so embarrassingly, transparently stupid that to go through the list and go through the quotations would be amounting to reducing my own integrity and standing and taste. So I'm not going to do that, except to say that no barrister, licensed law trading barrister, who can be said to belong to the Muslim faith or Islamic faith exists in that network who can be called a competent barrister or competent lawyer. I'm saying that. Come on, deny what I'm saying. Challenge the facts or challenge the assertion I'm making on the facts, on the evidence. None of you is a competent lawyer. Now, I have to mention as a part obituary the reported passing of Shibgat Qadri, whose full name was Sibgatullah Qadri, and he came from Pakistan, that is Pakistan now, in 1970, just a year before the tension and events of 1971 began. There was this racist murder of a man called Tosir Ali. Now, Tosir Ali, I think, came from a village not far from the village I was born and raised in the greater Sondarpur area. He came from Amkuna, I think, or a village near Asirganj Bazaar. Now, that was in 1970, and Tosir Ali used to work in a restaurant, in the kitchen of a restaurant in the Strand. And he was returning home late at night after work at the Strand based restaurant. Not an Indian restaurant, it's a kind of English restaurant, but he worked in the kitchen, probably as a porter. Now, that man was murdered by stabbing in Stepney, which is where he lived. Now, remember, that was the year 1970. And that was the year before the events of 1971 began to hit the world headlines. So in 1970, the people of what is now Pakistan were people of West Pakistan, and the people of what is now Bangladesh were people of East Pakistan. Tosir Ali was from East Pakistan. And historically, there was a meeting in protest against the racist murder. That meeting was held at the same place where 8 years later I led the meeting after Altaf Ali was murdered. And that earlier meeting of 1970 was led by Sibghatullah Qadri. Now, he was from West Pakistan, but there was no difference between West Pakistan and East Pakistan. The point I'm making here is this, that so close before 1971, this man, Sibghatullah Qadri, a barrister, was naturally the leader of the campaign against the racist murder of Ismat Ali. That shows that among the people of West Pakistan and East Pakistan, at that stage, there was no sense of hatred. This is very important because post facto, that is to say, after the 16th of December, when Indira Gandhi of India intervened with her particularly organized bombing campaign against the Pakistan army in East Pakistan and created Bangladesh on the 16th of December 1971. The commentary, the narratives have said that the ordinary people in the UK, ordinary people from East Pakistan and ordinary people from West Pakistan were full of hatred towards each other or one another. That only happened in the middle of the year, let's say, 1971, which was a direct reliance on the part of these people from East Pakistan and West Pakistan on the people from main lands, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, that were engaged in their confrontation or various armed confrontations. So Sibghatullah Qadri, I want to pay tribute to him because he was on the record and he, like anybody else, had no idea that there would be this significant series of events months away. He solidarized with the family, bereaved family, and relations of Tosir Ali. And he did that as sincerely, as comprehensively, as humanely as he would have done if Tosir Ali had come from a place in West Pakistan at the time. And Sibghat Qadri, I came to know Sibgat Kadri, when I came here to the UK, I didn't meet him as part of any court procedure or process. I met him at various events to do with opposing racism and racist aspects of the law. And I found him, in comparison with others, including Rudy Narayan, who was also a licensed law trader. And Rudy Narayan was completely dishonest, absolutely bonkers, and totally dishonest and out of his fucking head. Sibgat Kadri was not so volatile. And so I pay tribute to him, and I think in due course I'll pay a longer tribute to him and contextually update on his role and his contributions. Now, I noticed that in the so called court case that misguided people brought against Saitan Rushdie and his publishers, alleging that Saitan Rushdie's satanic verses was blasphemous, I noticed that Sibgat Kadri wasn't a part of the so called legal team of that prosecution or the court case. I wasn't involved because I would not be involved for the simple reason that most of the lawyers and the so called campaigners against Saitan Rushdie on that prosecution, on that blasphemy claim, were idiots. I would not ever sue Saitan Rushdie for blasphemy. I would not even sue him for blasphemy, even in a jurisdiction where blasphemy is effectively treated as a wrong. In Britain, blasphemy is not treated as a wrong, really. So anyone who knew the law or even the legal bureaucracy in the UK would never have brought that prosecution. But the fact that these idiots did bring that shows their idiocy. So I'm saying finally that among the wider group of so called Muslim lawyers, well, Sibgat Kadri accepted, I don't find any competent lawyers in practice in the contextual time. And the same follows when I talk about the, strange appearance on the front benches or back benches of the Conservative Party in the UK House of Commons. The strange appearance of so many kind of Indians, some Pakistanis, well, there are two half Pakistanis, let's say, both of them from Kashmiri background. The woman Nusrat Ghani and the barrister Rehman Chisti. Now, Nusrat Ghani is too timid and Chisti is too crafty. They haven't made any headway really because they've lacked substance. As for Saida Warsi, where do you start with her? Saida Warsi is all over the place. She has been there as a recruitee of the racist anti-Muslim Dave Cameron. Call me Dave. And yet she has not made any splashes, really. In the Conservative Party, which is dedicated against Muslims, there is no evidence that Saida Warsi has made any real headway in exposing the anti-Muslim evidence of the anti-Muslim behavior by the criminals in the Conservative Party. But she doesn't leave the Conservatives. She repeatedly hints at the Conservative being really anti-Muslim. but she never leaves. She is like some of the other kind of Muslim conservatives. These people are deluded. And I said deluded in the full knowledge of the statement by God to Satan as revealed in the Surah Al Isra, that Satan would succeed in carrying a number of deluded followers, while the majority of the faithful would not be deluded by Satan and would remain loyal to God. Now, these deluded Muslims keep getting given itsy bitsy pieces of the leftovers politically. None of them has been made cabinet member, really. And none of them has been given any substance. When Nusrat Ghani said that she was told that her disqualification within the Conservative Party was that she was a Muslim, even that she failed to make the impact and leave. Chisti, the idiot, is a licensed law trader, barrister. He got himself on the list as a potential leader of the Conservatives. He didn't get a single support. I mean, how is it? Did he not realize that he would not get any single support? The reason he would not get a single support is because he doesn't deserve support. Why? Because he doesn't amount to anything in terms of standing for any serious principle for even himself. What on earth is he doing carrying the conservative flag? It is because he doesn't amount to anything politically. I don't want to comment on his legal kind of acumen or expertise or competence. But as far as can be accessed publicly, he has not made anywhere. He has not made any milestones. He has not broken any mold legally. Now, among the Labour Party's Muslim members of parliament, what are they doing? They're doing here, there, and everywhere, and itsy bitsy. But none of them is known for any substantive contribution. What are these people? Why are they there? Why were they becoming MPs and why were they allowed to? First of all, they were becoming or they were allowed to become MPs for the simple opportunistic reason by the Labour Party. Because, for example, Naz Shah in Bradford, I mean, she would have been the best candidate in terms of getting the votes because of the demography of the voters. So that is the main consideration. After that, what happens after getting elected? These people don't make any contribution as elected members of parliament, neither in the context of the local area or in the context of the behavior of the racist and incompetent Labour Party or in the context of the racist regime, whatever the color of the government, racist regime that takes place in the UK or the international relations. Chisti, supposedly from Kashmir, and it's an embarrassment to see that he doesn't have anything to say about Kashmir. The Kashmir has been one of the longest running sites of violations of the United Nations resolution for decades. If there was a fit topic for raising in the House of Commons, that would be it. But Chisti is not there. He becomes a hologram most of the times. And when the debate was on nationally and internationally about the Rohingyas and the role of the United Kingdom, and Alak Sharma and other liars lied for the liar Boris Johnson as the foreign secretary at the time. There was no sign of Rahman Chisti, who still claims to be a Muslim. And there was nothing, really, from any of the Muslim Labour MPs, man or women. So we shall be continuing on all of those. These are all evidential updates and original updates about the real history of the battle that Muslims have to fight, Asians have to fight, and people of African and Caribbean backgrounds have to fight in this country. All these fights and struggles are completely denied by all the programs done under the banner of Black History Month. So it's not a history, it's not truthful, it's a lies month.